Should we start? What do you have? I'd like to call to order, please, City Council work session, Monday, October 7th, 2013. We have one item on the work session tonight, and the regular meeting will start immediately following this workshop. So around the table tonight, where Wally Campbell, Councilman Campbell, is out of town. Sherry Loretano is in court. So she should show up very soon, but I know she was still busy at the last phone call we made to her, but I think she'll make it by the regular meeting. So around the table, I'm just going to say that for the people out in the public, we have Councilman Cheryl Lynn, Councilman Joanne Osborne, what's your name? And Vice Mayor Pizzillo. Okay, so let's...
Bill Stick.
Oh, and Bill Stick. Sorry about that. Bill, do you mind moving down or something? Because I don't feel like you're part of us tonight. Okay, that happened to me twice today. So, well, what am I going to do? All right, so agenda items for discussion. This work session will be a discussion regarding priority-based budgeting program with an emphasis on review of council's focus areas, selections of attributes associated with that program. And Wynette Reed, Deputy City Manager, to present. Wynette?
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I have with me tonight John Casella. He is been my coworker, and he's going to take the lead tonight on this particular topic. It's a very short conversation tonight, but we did want to come back to you because when we last met with you, there was still some unanswered questions that we needed to finalize. So if you... Thank you. So just kind of a brief history here. We have developed a strategic action plan, and that is what is driving some of the, or is driving the results area and part of the scoring criteria that we will use. So the council's already set a strong base and foundation for the priority-based budgeting scoring process. We just need to identify some additional attributes, and John will make that clear as we go through the rest of the presentation. We've hired consultants to help us with this process, and our departments have been trained on the priority-based budgeting process. They have now completed identification of all of their programs. Those are being reviewed by the Center for Priority-Based Budgeting, and we'll get those comments back here by the end of this week. So we're already well into this process, and the next steps for the departments will be to do the scoring and the costing portion of this. So I am now going to turn it over to John Casella, the Budget and Research Analyst, and let him walk you through the rest of this.
Good evening, Mayor Lord, members of council. I guess this is the question that we need to answer at this stage. How do we figure out what is of the highest importance? When the consultant was here last, they kind of laid out very broadly their approach to how we implement the priority-based budgeting process. And what I want to do tonight is I want to talk about the particular tool that came up during our conversations that actually will be used to translate your values and the goals that you have as you have written and adopted in your strategic action plan, and how that translates through this tool to then be used to score the actual programs that we as a city provide, and then discuss also the attribute section, which is another part of that. So here is what the scoring tool looks like, and this was part of the original presentation that we had. And again, this page will come up multiple times throughout the presentation because as I start to talk about the different pieces of the scoring tool, I'm going to want to kind of come back to it so you can kind of keep it fresh in your mind where all these pieces go. Just as a quick overview, you'll notice that on the top, no, first of all, this is a scoring device from San Jose, California. And you'll see on the upper right, you'll see in the dark blue the priority results. And then on the left, you'll see the attributes. And then along the left-hand side of the document, you'll see the department and then the individual programs to their immediate right. And then, of course, all the numbers that go into scoring each program, which goes from left to right. The first section, the section on the right, the priority results, those are what we will derive from the strategic action plan. They are community specific, And then the section on the left is what we would associate more generically with good governance or anything that's required by law. So as you can see, and I'm sure you remember, these are the focus areas that were adopted in the city's strategic action plan, and they consist of the quality of life, fiscal resource management, sense of community, and economic vitality. Again, these are the overarching kind of values, and this is what we would like to see all the programs that we provide support. And so hopefully this tool will give us an idea of the degree to which they do or don't support these basic values. And there's my greatest achievement is the Blake screen. No. One thing in particular, in terms of the tool itself, when doing the scoring, you need to make sure that this device is sensitive enough, as they say, from an implementation standpoint, that it will differentiate amongst the different programs. So one of the things that we had decided upon, and one of the things that we had discussed with the consultant, was there were two particular areas that we felt like we wanted to draw out a little bit more on the results side, and again, based on the strategic action plan. So from quality of life, we are requesting that we add a result called Safe Community. And essentially, you know, what we're doing here is drawing out obviously a very important element of any program for the city. And again, we have the public safety element of it, but not just from the police and fire standpoint. You have it from a regulatory compliance standpoint. You have it from transportation network perspectives. So it's a safe community in the broadest sense of the word. But we felt like in terms of the quality of life that by pulling this out, we could emphasize this particular aspect a little more.
And I do want to emphasize that safe community is already in quality of life, but it was a recommendation of the consultants that this is important enough that we do need to just kind of pull it out from where it's sitting and have it scored separately than with the rest of the quality of life areas.
Right, so this is obviously, it's still reflective of the plan, it's just a little bit more specific. Likewise, on this slide, economic vitality, again, one of the issues, and obviously you're well aware of all the different master planning and things that we're going through. From the economic vitality, we chose to emphasize the infrastructure, the importance of infrastructure. Obviously going forward with our community being built out, I think at 10 or 15%, this is going to be a vital aspect of what we do going forward. So again, in terms of allowing the tool to pull out the relevant information, we wanted to add this on that right side in the results portion. Again, simply perhaps magnifying a little bit what is already in the strategic action plan that we created. So when taken as a whole, the results that we saw on that right-hand side, we're recommending that these be the criteria, sense of community, safe community, economic vitality, the infrastructure, fiscal and resource management, and quality of life. So the two embellishments, if you will, that we made to the original four would be this right side of the tool. And again, I believe the next slide. So the dark blue side here would have all 6 of those items as items that get scored by the departments when assessing their programs. And so moving on now to this more lighter blue on the other side, this is the attributes part of the scoring tool. Again, this is basically considered to be a more generic good governance, if you will, type of list. This is something that I believe came up in the last work session. So what we're doing is we're bringing back a list of 6 criteria. What's that?
7.
7 criteria. The other 6, 7. 7 criteria, and of the 7, we would recommend, and again, the consultant would recommend that 4 of these be chosen to be used as the attributes. And again, I'll go over a couple of them. For example, mandated to provide the program by law. I think we discussed this again in the last work session where, you know, there may be a federal requirement, there could be a state or local requirement. So again, it would be a matter of degree as to, you know, how far or whether or not you had the ability to not necessarily implement if you wanted to, especially if it was a local charter law, well, not a charter, but ordinance. And then there are others, for example, the change in demand and the other one on portion of community served. These two are actually rather complementary of one another, and it kind of gives you an idea of how maybe the tool would work. The portion of community served, again, you might say that if, let's say 100% of the community was served, well, that would be given a weightier measure because you're serving a greater portion of the population. Whereas something like change in demand for the program would be a little bit more interior to that, if you will, a little more sensitive, complementary. And again, given where Goodyear is today and the fact that there's a lot of growth yet to come, you may find that over time, what was considered important today may in the future not be deemed quite as important. So that particular one is a nice complement to something which is more broad. For example, you know, how much of the community itself it's served. It's a little more qualitative, if you will.
So in looking at these 7 areas and trying to narrow them down to 4, 5 at the most, what we're looking for from council is an idea of where you would like us to focus our attention on when we get to the scoring. And so kind of before we go on and finish, because this is really the meat of the work session right here. We've got the results already identified. It's really the attributes that the council thinks we should focus our time on.
All right. Who would like to start the conversation? If you don't, I have a suggestion. But yeah, good. Vice Mayor. Joe, we're at casual on work sessions. Joe.
Let me ask you this. I think mandate to provide the program has got to be one, because if we're mandated to do it, you know, by regulation, that's one. But I was wondering if we could combine 2 of them, because I think it's important on programs that we recover the cost, but it's the same token, I think it's important for those programs that we've developed that are cost effective and efficient, that are saving us money. We're doing it because it's an alternative to what we've had in the past, and it actually makes us operate more efficient, more cost effective. I don't know if the risk prevented or avoided, if that's kind of a combination with cost recovery or whatever, but I just think it's important to kind of go hand in hand, at least in my mind. Also, the portion of the community served by the program, I think is important, and I think one of those attributes would be the demand for that particular service. So, I mean, if we have a high demand that our citizens want that particular service, I think it kind of falls in that change, in that demand for service, a portion of the community. For number 4, you know, I'll throw that out to some of the others. You know, those 3 are the ones that kind of jump out at me. Reliance on the city to provide the program, I'm not sure if that's an attribute in my mind. That if you're going to pick 4 or 5 of them, I'm not sure how reliable on that one, because if it's mandated to provide the program, to me, more than likely, the reliance on the city could be part of it. But, you know, I hate to use that one specifically, because you can probably argue almost anything that you can contract out. It's just a matter, is that efficient, and do you want to trust that? You want to trust the health and welfare of your citizens to a contracted operation, because ours is a little different. We're not driven by profit. We're driven by health and safety. So, you know, I'm not sure if the reliance on the city provider program is one that I would stress as an attribute. That's kind of my feedback.
Joanne?
I think that the one that's standing out to me that will be council discussion, when I think about Parks and Rec, and we've had somewhat of those discussions in the past, that there are some of the programs that we're actually recovering may only be 25% to 30%. And so off the tip of my head, that one stands out, that we may need to discuss that again, because if within that cost recovery, I think there's going to be things that we say, no, we want 100% recovery, but we need to be flexible in saying there's going to be items that, you know, we're happy with the 25% because it's something that we want our citizens to have available to them.
Bill?
I keep studying the list, so pardon me for not looking at you. I agree with Joe that the mandated to provide that is kind of essential. Yeah, the but the reliance on the city to provide the program might, Joan, I'll take a little different point of view on that. And I think the Parks and Rec programs are a great example of that. Sure, there's somebody else that offers park and recreation type programs. You can get them from the Y. You can get them from team, club soccer, club baseball. So there's always, but our community really depends on us to offer those programs. So they are relying on us to provide that program. And I think you said you could argue either way. But that's how I view that particular area. The portion of the community serve, I think is very important. We can say we've got to have this, but we've only got 10% of our own residents using it and a very small percentage of non-residents. I think that tells us whether we want to continue moving forward or not. Risk prevented and avoided, I think that goes to the mandated piece. Future cost savings or cost avoidance. I think you can probably build that into either the mandated, either we're doing it because it's charter or a reliance on the city program. I think you can weave that into something else without it being a placeholder all by itself.
Sherry?
I think we're getting a consensus here. I see pretty much the same thing. When I'm looking at these, I'm kind of looking at they look like subparts of each other. Mm-hmm. So, the portion of the community served kind of really goes in the change in demand. I mean, obviously, if you look at who's been served and how long they've been served, you can find the change in demand. Mm-hmm. And so I think I agree with what Joe and Bill were saying pretty much, that the mandates, that's the no-brainer. And the rest, I think, can kind of be blocked down into 3 more. You just kind of merge them together.
Combine them.
Yeah, they're pretty much the same.
Yeah, because has everybody spoken? No, Sherilyn.
Well, the one thing I would say is I tend to think that if the city is the one purveyor of a product that's necessary in the city, that you'd really have to look at what that service is. And if there are other people that are providing the same service, then it's a great chance for private-public partnerships and coalitions to form to make that happen. That would be my thought. So I think it's important to consider it, because then perhaps you can develop other opportunities.
I think a prime example of that is our social services. Our social, we have Avondale take care of. Is that how you term it here? I have to make sure I'm using the right term, but it isn't something that we can do at this time, and we can pay them for a service that they can perform. And so that's something the city probably needs, but at this time we're not able to do that. So that makes a difference. But I agree. I think we can combine some of this. When I look at the risk prevention and avoidance, we do that in about everything, don't we? I mean,
Well, look at when we had the whole false alarm issue. That was.
So we sort of use that one in every category. So I don't know if it needs to stand alone. It would just seem to me that is a given in any of those, that we're always looking at, what is the risk of this? How can we avoid that? And I can use many examples that we actually made that statement and asked you on a program or on an idea or anything, could you tell us what our risk is? So I don't think that needs to stand alone. I think that needs to be under something else. I sort of go along with the rest of the council on the comments they've made. And I think it's really important somewhere in here that it's all flexible. I think
that's
I think flexibility to me is the most important thing. I don't want to see us get into something that all of a sudden we don't have that ability, because everything is changing so quickly, and we never know. Right now things are looking good for the future, and the ups and downs seem to have gone away, and we're a little more steady and an upcline. I would be afraid to prevent any of that.
Well, in some of the programs, they begin heavy on one end, and as they get into play, then some of those partnerships come, and some of the the money's taken off our hands. I mean, prime example that we'll have to discuss in the future as we grow were those human service issues and after-school programming, things like that that are going to come.
Does it better? That's the thing. When you're making a judgment on, okay, so, well, let's see, the city should do it. We should rely on the city. Well, maybe there's another city or some other entity that is doing a great program, and why would we want to try to match that if it meets the needs of our citizens and meets the costing and everything else? So, any other comments? Did that help you, or are you lacking something on responses on this?
No, and I do want to summarize, but I do want to comment. The beauty of this whole program is it's flexible. It's about having conversations, and that's the important part, is we get a chance to talk about things, even if it's a quartile 4. We may keep the program because there's a reason to keep it. Right. So there's flexibility with this, and that's the marvelous thing about it. I do want to summarize this, and then before I turn it back over to John to make sure I've got the top kind of 4, what I heard, and we're going to weave the others into this. So we had the mandated to provide, reliance on the city to provide the program, cost recovery, and portion of the community served. But the other 3 areas were just kind of subcomponents of those 4. Those were the ones, as I'm putting my little check marks next to them, that I heard over and over. Okay.
Is that everybody nodding their head? Okay.
Go back and yeah, there you go. Just summarize there.
Okay, so again, as I alluded to earlier, I keep putting this slide in just so you can see, again, tie back the conversations, the attributes, the results in your programs and departments, and then, of course, the weighted scoring that would occur going across. So that's actually all I have.
So the next steps, we're going to finish the program identification. We are doing the costing and scoring training on October 17th, so all of our departments will be trained in that particular area. Budget is a big help in making sure we have the costing and those numbers available. And we will begin the scoring process and have all of these results back to you the first part of next calendar year. And this will be, we'll weave it into the budget process.
I see a microphone being picked up. Bill?
Shocking. Can you, John, can you go back to the last, I think one more beyond here. I think it was, no, that one. We have the result area, and I noticed that under safe community, there was a reference made to safe transportation routes, I think.
Networks.
Does that sound right?
That's correct.
And then under, I think it was quality of, you may want to go back another 1 or 2.
Why don't you just flick it back to that?
This one?
2 of them mentioned traffic. Let me just say that.
Well, there's one, economic vitality.
That it would seem if you are scoring the same component in multiple areas, it will always score high.
Right.
So is there a reason that we've got such an emphasis on
Well,
streets?
in terms of the actual tool and that criteria, it will only show up once, even though it may show up multiple times in terms of the text that supports the activity. These are actually identifying the actual result that will get scored, so it will only show up one time.
No, I understand that, but just take, for example, and maybe I'm off on this, but you take a street program, whatever that is, and you're going to score it under economic vitality. You're also going to score it under quality of life. So that same street program is going to hit twice, where something that's very black and white, and pardon the pun, but like I'm going to say a PD thing may just be quality of life, and it's only going to score once, and it'll be zeros in some of those other categories. Do you kind of see where I'm going with that?
Yes, and it's actually looking at it from 2 different perspectives. Under the economic vitality, we
Can you
want to
talk
make
closer to the microphone?
I'm sorry. We want to make sure that we are building roads, that we have a well thought out plan, that we have the connections, to the different So it's really about the planning, building, and maintaining of those. This is making sure, this is focusing on the safety of the networks, and it's more of the well-maintained, the traffic flow, the safe mobility for motorists and cyclists, so that we've got, the lanes and all of that. So in the recommendations from the consultants, it was to focus on the safety aspects of transportation in this one area and focus on more of the building, the infrastructure, and maintenance of them. So they're two different focuses. When we break them out, we have all of the definitions around there.
Right. And I guess I see that as potentially overweighting the transportation side of the house. And for example, you can argue that parks applies to quality of life, sense of community, et cetera, and it's only going to hit once in that loop. So I guess that I just want to make sure that we're going to apply an equal. I think we can argue that these all belong in multiples, and that we're careful because transportation, can become a financial. I don't want to say burden, but can really become a financial, have a huge impact on the city and whether we're able to move things forward or not.
What we'll do is go back and talk to John and Chris about that and share those comments and see what way we can work through that to make sure that that's addressed for you.
Just to comment quickly, again, remember that like safe community or quality of life, each of those are going to have a scale associated with them. That scale will have a particular set of criteria associated with the numbers that we use. So even though generically, conceptually, you may see things relating to streets or roads, as Juanette has alluded to, the emphasis will be different so that the scoring criteria will emphasize those differences. And so when you score it, you'll be scoring something different between the two.
Sure. No, like I said, that's the only thing that seemed to repeat itself, and that's what caught my eye. So I appreciate the detailed explanation.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
We're done.
You're done. Okay, so
Yeah.
Tell us remind us again what the next step is from here.
We're going to begin the costing and scoring with the departments, and then there's a review process of all of this that will be done by the leadership team, and we will be bringing everything back to council the first part of next calendar year, and it will be part of our budget process as we go through 6 months of budget.
It's a very interesting presentation, and thank you, Council, for actually all of you verbalizing in this. It really helps them, gives them direction to go on into the next step. So we're finished with this meeting, and we'll save any information items to the main meeting. I'm going to adjourn it. I know you're going to we need a small break in order for them to move the equipment up to the dais. So do you need 10 minutes or